Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Quantum Leap Season 2, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up where we left off with last episode with the leap that Ben found himself in the middle of, which I brought it up last episode. I was like, it's actually heartbreaking. Ben can usually prevent any terrible thing from happening because usually the leap allows him to. This is a situation where he couldn't do anything for Lawrence. It's like, yeah, by the time he showed up, Lawrence was already like in the process of dying and dies. And it's just like, damn, that sucks. You couldn't save him. Because like I said, I don't, maybe this happened before, but like I feel like it would have stuck out on my mind more if that was the case. So I do feel like it is definitely got to be, this is the first, and it's kind of sad. But Ben's inside the body of a professor who's looking for something, which we ultimately find out it's a hidden formula that Einstein had come up with. But I even love Ben being like, right, but I don't know anything about this thing. Like, I've studied everything about Einstein. How would I not know about that? It's like, well, to be fair, you're a time traveler, and we know that your effect on the timeline does affect present day. So it's like, hey, maybe it's a thing of you're always meant to interfere with this situation. This is before we get into the story. I'm like, well, it's most likely you end up finding this and you end up changing present day, which even everyone else is kind of getting giddy about it, because it's like, oh, like obviously it have a major impact on, like, you know, whether gas being a thing or not, like, well, gas being the situation that it is with cars and stuff. It's like, oh, maybe we'll have flying cars now. We'll cut back on the global warming situation. But either way, the real interesting thing is that Ben ends up running into Hannah, which I knew. I was like, because I talked about this in episode 3 when she pops up, that it's, if you look at the credits, Eliza Taylor's name came before Ernie Hudson. So I was like, it seems like we're not a one and done character. Like if I never saw that, it would have surprised me to see her again. But I was like, she's got to pop up at some point. But even now, Ben's like, wait, is she actually here? Because this is 6 years after he met her and convinced her to come to Princeton and stuff. And now it's like, is she another Martinez? And it's like, no, it doesn't seem like she is. And it's like, did the universe bring us together? Because even Jen was like, yeah, maybe the universe brought you together because the universe thought you needed a friend. I mean, it's a very lonely journey. Like, yeah, he's got everyone with him, like, on this ride, the Quantum Leap team. But the fact of the matter is, this is someone that he can go along with. Because I was kind of like, it felt like Ben and Hannah kind of hit it off in that episode too. And I was like, that's interesting, especially when Ben finds out about the whole, because that was at the same time he had found out, well, because that was the leap after he found out about Addison and Tom. So, because he had found out like the end of episode 2, and he was kind of dealing with the aftermath of that in episode 3, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so I was kind of getting that vibe of like, that felt like, because he was really kind of resonating with Hannah, and so they are trying to find this hidden formula. That's what Lawrence got killed for. So, and obviously they're thinking that, you know, because it's like the 50s, so they're thinking it's commies, and so they're thinking it's Russian agents doing it. When ultimately we end up finding out it's actually Nazis. We end up finding out because obviously this is tied to Operation Paperclip, which I'm like, is Hunters, the reason why I know that, if you've never seen Hunters, it's a show that takes place in the 70s, about a group of people hunting Nazis. It's kind of worldwide, but I mean, at least in the first season, it's mainly U.S. based because, you know, I know about the U.S.'s situation of like having like Nazi scientists, because there were even Nazi scientists that were a part of the NASA program. But I don't know how many other, I'm sure it happened. Like, I doubt the U.S. was the only one. I'm sure there are other countries that grabbed up Nazi scientists as well. I mean, I'd be really surprised if the U.S. managed to be the only ones who did it. I'd assume other countries did as well. But I feel like I don't really hear that as much about other countries. Like, Hunters is the most recent thing I know that's in reference Paperclip. I was sworn there's something else, like TV show-wise, that I've watched that talked about Paperclip. I feel like Hunters wasn't the first time I'd heard that, but I know random stuff here and there about history. I don't know if I knew that. It feels like I definitely feel like I learned it from a TV show, but I don't think it was from Hunters. I feel like I learned it from something else, and then it got reconfirmed, like it got brought up again in Hunters. And I'm going on this whole tangent, but yeah, that kind of, even because this is Jen's first time hearing about it, it's like, it's not something, I don't even think like, I don't ever really remember that coming up during like any of my history lessons in high school. I took world history, I took civics. It kind of makes sense. It probably wouldn't come up in civics. Probably would come up in world history and U.S. history. Those are the history classes I took in high school. Definitely feel like it would have come up in U.S. history, but I mean that was like well over what? That was like 12, 13 years ago for me when I took my U.S. history class. So I'm like, I probably just don't remember, but I feel like that would have probably clicked in my head a little bit more of like, oh, this are, the U.S. hired Nazis and they were part of like a lot of science programs in this country, so either way, but yeah, that's kind of like I'm not just trying to put it all in the U.S. I mean, I'm not going to mince where we all know every single country's got a dark history, like that they're not proud of. It's just like it just happens to be very U.S. centric in this regard, but like every country's got shady shit in their past. Like no country's like free of that. At least not no country that I'm aware of. Once again, I'm not well versed in the world, so either way. I thought this was going to mainly end up being a Jen going alone for the ride because obviously Ben kind of needed some time away from Addison. Magic after the last leap is, needed some time off as well. But Jen's helping out Ian, which we'll get to Ian's side of things later, but Jen's juggling that, which I love that Jen and Ian had to like rock, paper, scissors because Tom was like, yeah, we got to kind of put this in rotation about who's going to be Ben's like hologram. And I love that it ended up... It being Tom happened way faster than I thought. I'm like, wait, we're already getting Tom? Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting... I knew we'd get it sooner or later. I just wasn't expecting it to be this soon. I'm like, episode 6 already? Wow. Especially because Tom has ties to Princeton, where Ben's at right now, because he went there, and it's actually where he met his first wife. Her name's like either Kay or Kate, which is kind of sad. Obviously, he lost her a couple years ago to cancer, as we kind of... I don't remember this is our first time. We knew his wife had died, but I think this is the first time we heard that it was cancer. I think it was the first time we heard it was cancer, but we definitely knew she had passed, Which obviously Ben and Tom, it's like, yeah, him being your hologram is kind of awkward because he's kind of trying to get adjusted to it. Like multiple times he tries to shake Ben's hand and then like he's looking for a book to kind of reveal a secret passage and he tries to grab it. He's like, oh, yeah, it takes a little while. It's like, hey, bro, I get it. It's your first rodeo in the hologram situation. I get it. Like, you'll get used to it, or maybe not. I doubt this is the only time we'll see Tom kind of take over, especially because with the military experience. I feel like, obviously Addison's utilized that, but I don't know off the top of my head, I don't think she's ever really utilized that with Ben when it comes to like using military tactics, because it's like, right, Ben's not a trained soldier. He's in the body of a trained soldier, but still, I guess it's just because like, I guess Tom doesn't know how much Ben knows about, once again, he carries over stuff from like his previous leaks because it's all muscle memory, and he might be in a different body, but his mind remembers. So he just has to remember to adjust his body to do it. Like obviously the bodies are different shapes and sizes. So you have to kind of compensate for that. That's obviously come up in combat fighting situations over the course of the series so far. I do like the kind of treasure hunt thing that Ben and Hannah kind of go through in this episode, and kind of deciphering stuff and figuring stuff out. It kind of feels a little, even though I've never seen the movies, just what I know of the movies, it kind of feels a little National Treasure. But to be fair, that all kind of I feel like I was about to say, like, obviously that's still in that same wheelhouse of like your Indiana Jones, your Nathan Drake, your Laura Crofts, but it's like, well, I think the National Treasure things are kind of still in its own lane in some capacity, so I think I'd still put it kind of in the same vein as this, but because Ben's hoping this whole situation will also help out Hannah in the long run, because who she works for, what was his name, Donovan or something like that, would never give her the proper credit due. It would never publish like her paper, and he'd end up taking all the credit. So Ben's hoping this will help her out, because it's like, right, she's a very smart person and she's worked hard to get to where she is, and she's kind of been overlooked so much in the past, and like I don't want that, just kind of her name to kind of fade into obscurity. because sadly there's so many probably smart people who've fallen into obscurity because you just never know the contributions that they contributed to something in the past because just their names weren't put there because they never got the due credit. That applies in so many capacities, whether it's on the more scientific side of things, whether it's on the comic book capacity in some cases, so. Or creations of certain characters and stuff like that, but tangents and all that side, you get what the point I'm trying to make. The thing I thought was the most unexpected, the thing that took me by surprise is Ben telling Hannah who he really is. Because he had talked to Jen, he was like, I think Hannah might know it's me. She might not be able to recognize, but on some level, I was like, Ben, you might be a little too wishful thinking because you like Hannah and you're not willing to admit it. I thought that's all it was, but it's like, she even admits later on, she's like, oh, I knew it was you. I could feel it in my heart. I just couldn't explain it. I was like, wow. Because she took it all well. I mean, to be fair, Ben told her things only no one would know. Like, how would you know certain details about the stuff, like their first encounter and the last thing they said to each other, considering no one else was around when they said the last, this is goodbye, or it's not goodbye, it's see you later. And she's so fascinated, like, oh my God, you're from the future. It's like, but you look, I knew it was you. He was like, well, basically, I leap into people. And she's like, wow, this is amazing. He's like, really? Because even he was shocked by, like, wow, you are handling this well. And just for her, it's just like, oh my God, like, this is so incredible. This is so amazing. That really kind of blew her mind. I even thought it was dope when she ended up destroying that formula that Einstein had made, because once again it could be used as a weapon, and she has a photographic memory, so she ended up destroying it. But we find out the professor she works for is actually a Nazi scientist. So it's like, he's like, yeah, I told the US government, I'm going to do stuff for your side. But it's like, nah, I still believe in my mission. It's like, cool. And so he wanted Hannah to build a bomb. And so Tom's advice to Ben on how to deal with this worked out in the long run, and he was able to take the guy down. And I love that it turned into a whole fencing situation at the end too. So I thought that was pretty dope. I think even Ben kind of took himself by surprise where he was like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this fencing thing. But I love, like, obviously the situation, it's still awkward, but I think it did bring Ben and Tom closer, because Ben just kind of, because to him, Tom will just be, hey, he's the guy that took my fiance from me, which is, it's kind of a complicated thing. Like, you're entitled to feel that way, but it's a complicated thing of, you have to feel your feelings, but you also have to be very understanding of the circumstances and everything. Like, obviously, a lot of last episode kind of put a lot of that, not last episode, the episode before last, episode 4, put a lot in that in perspective for him. What I think is so interesting, though, like, for Tom, this was kind of like, not necessarily a closure, but it kind of put things in perspective for him. And he had said, like, he looks at it, he's like, this tree where those kids are putting their names. He's like, me and my wife put our name there. He's like, the fact of the matter is, just the funny thing of, like, repeating the cycle of something like 50 years later. And even him being like, our future is just someone else's past, isn't it? I was like, that's very, like, poetic to put it that way. It's like, yeah, like, your future will always be someone else's past. And it is that thing of kind of like, right, we're thinking about us as being forever type of thing, kind of planning out the future, but like, that's the past. And once again, in this case of like, I'm looking at people put their names, their initials on this tree. Me and my future wife did it 50 years from now. So it's like, it puts things in perspective, kind of being a little more boots on the ground with the whole time travel of it all. So that was interesting. And because him and Addison ended up talking beforehand about, she said that obviously they bonded over their trauma of their losses, and she's like, the moment we started going out, you stopped talking about because they are engaged, aren't they? They're not just dating, they're engaged, right? I believe they are. I can't remember. But it's like the moment we got together, you stopped talking about your wife. And he's like, no, just because I just want to focus on the mission right now. But then later on, when he talks to Addison, he's like, I miss my wife. And she's like, it's understandable. That doesn't jeopardize what we have. It's okay to miss her. Just like she has, like, your love for her won't ever go away. It's like, you can talk to me about her. Because they used to talk about those people. It doesn't change. Like, this is someone that was so important to you. Where it's like in his wife's case, she's dead. Sadly, in Addison's case, Ben's alive, but she's moved on. And once again, she's even talking to. It's like, right, you and your wife, me and Ben. It's complicated, but it doesn't change the fact of what we have. So I thought that was very beautiful. So it's going to be interesting to see the continued progression of that. But I think there's this really sweet thing between Ben and Hannah. Where it's like, right, she has so many questions about the future, but it's like I think Hannah's going to be the type of person to keep it to herself, but it's also, he said, like, the guy, the professor, he's not going to remember any of this, so you're just going to make him think he had like a concussion or something, after everything. And she's like, oh, I get it. And, but the only question she could have asked anything, all she wanted was to know Ben's real name. He's like, my name is Ben Song. And she's like, well, we'll see each other later. He's like, are you so sure? She's like, because Ben actually has this moment, which is actually really sad, that Ben's like, yeah, it's kind of sad. I meet all these amazing people during my leaps. And some of those people, he would be fortunate enough to meet them, because there have been occasions where it's been relatively close enough that some of these characters would still be alive present day, of like if he managed to get back, if ever, right? But he's never run into anyone. I'm curious, did Sam ever have that? Like during his adventures during the original Quantum Leap, did he ever run into anyone? Like, I'm curious, because that might make the whole him and Hannah thing even more special. But it also feels like this could be set up for a tragedy. We're talking like the time traveler's wife, or even the Doctor and River Song type of situation. That's the one I always go back to, because once again, I was more familiar with River Song and Doctor. If you're unfamiliar with Doctor Who, basically River Song and the Doctor constantly meet each other out of order. Like they're in this interesting relationship where it's like, when he first meets her, she knows everything about him because they're meeting each other out of order. The first day he ever met River Song, canonically speaking, is kind of like, she's had so much time in history with him at that point that she knows everything there is to know about him. And you just see that relationship develop over the years as they kind of meet each other out of order. And so I'm kind of wondering, whereas it seems like Hannah and Ben aren't meeting each other out of order, I think he'll meet her again later. But eventually he will meet her as an older woman, like, because this is the 50s. She might die in like the early 2000s or late 90s, depending on like how old she is. Like, so it is a situation like, even if Ben got home, he would probably never meet her. So it is just going to be that situation of she'll end up living her own life and meeting. I mean, they ran into each other 6 years later, so who knows? Like, maybe it's another 10 years. She might have a family type of thing. I don't know. Especially because she introduced the concept to Ben of like, he introduced the concept of, I can't get back home. This is my life. So she might be the person that might help forge the technology forward to figuring out a way to bring Ben back home. Like, for all we know, this might have all been an Ouroboros, It's always been in my lexicon. But even more so because of Loki. But maybe this is an Ouroboros where she's always had ties to the... maybe Ben was always meant to go back in time and meet Hannah because she's fundamental to the beginning of the Quantum Leap project. I'm also curious, there's got to be some tie to her present day. Like, she's probably most likely not alive, but maybe there's some history where, like, oh, maybe her daughter or grandchild or child is involved in something related. The company that Rachel works for, maybe there's a connection to Hannah in that capacity, or maybe it's going to be a thing of, hey, maybe she's related to Tom. Tom didn't say anything, but for whatever reason in my head, I was thinking, like, we're going to find out that Hannah's related to Tom or something. I don't think so, but that's one thing that crossed my mind earlier in the episode. But it's like, she's going to have ties to someone present day, and that's going to play out an overarching element to this. Because now she knows time travel is real, and how that's going to play out. Like I said, her story... her story might go a little more River Song than I give it credit for. Not necessarily out of time, like, oh, they meeting out of, or because the person who is starting to, like, who's coming after the quantum leap stuff is like, I mean, anyone would want to, like, get all that information in text, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it feels like with Ian and Rachel's side of things, like, Hannah's tied to that storyline in some shape or form. Like, there's some descendant connection. Like I said, I could be reading way too much into that. But it's like, yeah, they met twice. Yeah, I went on this whole diatribe. My point was, I lost the thread a little bit. Sorry. Was it is kind of sad that, like, it's something you recognize, but you never think about it until Ben put it into words. Where it's like, yeah, I meet some amazing people, and I just never get to see them again, and it's kind of sad. Like, I went on the diatribe of, like, right, some of those people will be alive that he can go find present day if he comes back. That was the whole point, right? So. But yeah, you and Hannah happen to run into each other, and you've never run into anyone else that wasn't also a leaper in the Martinez situation, or someone that you knew in the capacity of, like, going to the future and meeting Ian, you know, so. But the two of them do kiss, which is, like, very poetic, that to be, hey, and Ben ends up leaping in the middle of that, which is very going to be awkward when she goes, oh, hey. So hopefully he kind of snaps out of it, and she pulls away at the last minute before the professor comes back and be like, oh, well, how did I get here? And then she'll realize, oh, Ben's not here anymore. So I'm really curious to see what's going to be the next time that they meet and under what circumstances. You get to just straight up explain. But it probably will be a sad situation. It'll probably be like once again, like when she's older. So it's just always going to be like they won't have time together. Because she's like, right, I'm moving forward in time, you're moving back in time. It would, like I said, it would be interesting if they went even deeper, where it's like he ends up going back a little further in time. It still ends up meeting her, but maybe her a little younger. Like there might, once again, a little more time traveler's wife, little less Doctor Who in that capacity. But you know, so we'll see. But the other side of things involves someone that works for Rachel's boss. I didn't realize it was her until I saw her name in the opening credits, but it's Floriana Lima, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing I know, because I was trying to remember off the top of my head, I was like, there's two things she was on around roughly the same time a couple years ago. And the things I remember what it was. She played Riggs' wife in the Lethal Weapon TV show, and around that same time she was also in Supergirl, because she was in like season 2 and 3. Those are the only seasons she was in. She was Alex's ex, Maggie. And I think they got engaged eventually, but obviously they broke off the engagement. But like, I think, yeah, she was only in seasons 2 and 3, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's kind of interesting seeing her kind of in such an evil, maniacal position of kind of forcing Ian's hand of like, hey, so we have access to that chip we gave you. If you don't play ball, we basically can shut it off. And basically we have to enter a code every 24 hours to keep it active. So if you don't play ball, oh, I guess you're not going to be able to track Ben. Oh, woe is me. You're the one that made the deal. You're supposed to be giving us some information. Oh, we were stealing information. It's like, no, we were just getting what we were naturally owed. So it's like, Ian's completely screwed in this department, and Jen eventually talks to them about it. And it's like, right, you're not alone in this, so don't try to handle it alone. Go ask for help. And I didn't know whether it was like, okay, who was Ian going to ask for help? I was like, you're going to tell... Eventually, they're going to have to tell Tom, Magic, and Addison, and maybe even let Ben know about what's kind of happening present day. Magic and Tom know there's something up, but they haven't really pushed it yet, I think. But the person he ends up going to is Rachel, and it's like, I need your help. Because Ian's like, I know I'm not very good at it, but at the end of the day, this is for Ben. Like, I need your help. This could put Ben in danger. And so I'm going to need you to like kind of like hack into something. It's like, you know, this would not only get me fired, it could basically destroy my career. Ian's like, I know I'm asking a lot, but for Rachel, it's like, no, do it. She's like, because for her, it means the world that he was willing to ask. Like, obviously he keeps walls and barriers up, and it's just for him to kind of, for them to bring him down and let her in means a lot to her. And it's like, I love you. And, you know, they're like, I love you too, which is really sweet. So luckily they kind of turned I've been saying this recently too, they hit Floriana's character with the Uno reverse, and they like they know who she is and where she lives, and so Jen and I guess they're also keeping Rachel. I guess maybe Rachel did her part, and she will probably kind of be their inside person if she hasn't already been kind of exposed because of all of this. But they got the upper hand, and it's like, cool, if you don't play ball, well, we're going to turn that chip off. And Ian's like, well, we'll take that risk. But it's because they've got Rachel working on how to kind of bypass that, I think. So we'll have to wait to see where that storyline goes. But I definitely know it's not the last time we've seen Floriana's character. I'm really, really curious because we haven't directly dealt with Rachel's boss. Makes me think it's probably going to be, for one, someone very specific cast as because I'm curious to find out who it is. Is it going to be an actor I'm familiar with? That's going to be the big question. But also, like I said, that's got to tie into this Hannah stuff in some shape or form. But we'll ultimately have to wait to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good